Hey everybody. You guys all hear and see me okay? Everyone in the chat? Let's say hi to some folks. Oh, not playing politics. I thought you were some troll. Damn. Okay. Hi, Donny Cho. Hey there. Hey there, handsome. Be kind, my special lady. Hey there. Always. It's always good to have you here. Shows don't feel the same when you're not around. There's Moon at Noon, my favorite Marylandian. Let's see who else. Who else? Gemini Moon. It's been a while, lady. Always my brother from another mother, Glenn Dennison. And finally, Lindsay. It's good to see you here. I haven't seen you here in a bit. I haven't seen you in a minute, girl. Okay, who else is here? I guess that's it for now. All right. All right. I guess we got this show rolling. All right. So, yeah, so lately, guys, I've been a bit busy. Life, has been kind of getting a bit hectic, and there's been a lot of stuff going on, and I got shit to do tomorrow, and I've been pretty busy, so I can't prepare my topics as usual for today. So I kind of figured I would just dig into the old bag of tricks, as they would say, the old archives and tell a story that I haven't told in a long time. I've told this story before on other podcasts years ago, but ever since let's see, it's been a while, a little over about a year and a half since I've started hanging out with these cryptid folks and stuff and going on other podcasts. I realized recently that I haven't told my main paranormal story. So I kind of figured I might as well do that right now because I've got a lot of shit to do. Normally, I put a lot of you know, contrary to what you may think, I actually do put a lot of prep time into some of these episodes. I know a lot of it seems loosey goosey, but I do. I do. And yeah, I like to actually. It's like a fun hobby for me. So, but this week I didn't have time to prepare all that. I will the next episode, but today I kind of figured I would share I guess, a cool story. I've shared some other paranormal encounters that I've had on my own, but this is the main one. Okay, this is hey there, Puck Elf. Yeah, this is the main paranormal experience that I had. This was the one that was like everyone's got that one, right? Everyone's got that one paranormal story that you've watched in these shows that was the game changer for them, right? Hey there, girl in her gong. All right, just like my buddy. Let's see, Danny is here. Danny has arrived, baby. All right, just like everyone's favorite troll, Jason McLean, he had his own red pill moment, as they would say, when he saw that pterosaur. He has recounted that story on his show, still out there if you want to catch it. Or if you dig into Texas old archives, he's got that seminal story, right? That seminal experience that pretty much took him from being just a regular ass dude to being, oh no, now he's this cryptid paranormal guy, right? Bigfoot Michigan Rob, our friend we all know and love. He had his Bigfoot experience. If you catch his show, you will have heard it, or you could hear it if you tune in. He had his Bigfoot encounter that was very traumatic. It was life changing, and it was the game changer for him, right? Tex has talked about on his show his experience with the dogman like creature when he was a kid that pretty much changed his life and took him again from being a regular dude to being now he's a cryptid guy. And now he's got his own show and he's talking about cryptids every week, right? A lot of the people in this community and in this field, not everyone, a lot of them have had that one experience that really changed, I guess, the way they see things, the way they prioritize, the things that they think about on a daily basis. So I've I've come to realize recently that I have my own story in that regard, but I've never quite I haven't shared it recently. I do remember I did tell this story when I did a guest appearance on Casual Conversations with GNA a couple of years back. Gloria and Eileen's channel. Check them out when you get the chance. They're a bunch of swell gals. And but yeah, it's been a while. So I figured, I haven't had time to prepare. I might as well share the main story for me that kind of really rocked my world and made me turn into like our friends Jason, Rob, and Tex, made me turn from a regular ass dude to now I'm like this, I guess, paranormal cryptid guy. Okay, so let's set the scene here. The year I believe was it's 2017. It was June. It was like early summer. I was living in North Carolina at the time. Overall, pretty directionless in life at that particular juncture in my life. I had been living in North Carolina for a little under a year, but then things started coming together, right? I got a new job after like a year of job searching. I found a pretty cool, stable job, and I actually started seeing somebody. I did like just started seeing somebody. She was this girl who was local to North Carolina, white girl, as if that matters, but just from mind's eye sake. Born and bred, raised in North Carolina. And she and I had just started dating. Like this was like not even like 2 weeks into our relationship. We had just started dating. And after 2 weeks, things are cool. I've got a new job, new girlfriend. Things are starting to come together in my life. And just about a couple weeks prior, um, I started gaining interest in the paranormal. Hey, Flock. It's been a while. I haven't seen you here in a bit. Okay. Like just a few weeks prior, I'm sitting in my buddy's restaurant watching Dead Files on TV, being like, yo, are ghosts real? Yeah. This had happened like a few weeks prior to the events of this story, right? So, oh, Ryan, I wish. I wish. Maybe when I was in my 20s living in Korea, but anyway. So, yeah, a few weeks prior, I'm at my buddy's restaurant, hanging out there every day, watching Dead Files because I did not have the ability to change the channel. So I'm just sitting there watching it over and over, suddenly realizing, holy shit, are ghosts real? Wait, if ghosts are real, then what is magic real? And I'm starting to think all this stuff. And by the way, I was smoking a lot of pot at the time. So, my imagination was kind of on overdrive. So I'm like thinking very deeply and philosophically about it even because I'm like, well, if things like ghosts and magic are real, then what does that say about the nature of our reality? And have we been completely desensitized by living in this materialistic, objective worldview? I started thinking these thoughts very heavily. And prior to all this, I did not give a flying fuck about the paranormal, right? Not to say that I was a paranormal naysayer, because when I was in Korea, people had come up to me and told me their ghostly encounters, and there were some gnarly ones, and I believed them. I wasn't like a naysayer because I'm not an asshole like that. I always like to consider myself open minded, but it was just paranormal stuff was just never a priority in my brain. It was just not something I really thought about or gave a shit about. I thought it was interesting when I would listen to like Joe Rogan's podcast where he would talk about like UFOs and Bigfoot, but that was it really. Um, yeah, it wasn't that I didn't believe, I just didn't care. But at my buddy's restaurant 2 weeks prior to the events of the story, that's when I started really, I wouldn't say caring, but I started taking it like a little more seriously. Like I started talking about it, bringing it up in conversations, asking like my friends and people who I meet, like, hey, so what are your thoughts on the paranormal? Right. So around the same time, I meet this girl. We start dating, and she's an atheist. She doesn't believe in any of this paranormal crap, which is fine. But we would talk about it, and she was, we would have some cool conversations about it. So again, keep in mind, right? A couple weeks into just kind of being like, "Hey, are ghosts real?" And then like just not even 2 weeks, new job, new girlfriend. So ostensibly, at the first point, beginning of every relationship, when you start dating someone, ostensibly it's like, "Hey, let me take you to meet some of my friends and let's hang out." Right? Try to take her to meet some of my friends. For the first time, she was gonna bring her new Asian boyfriend to meet all of her friends, and these were all, like, natives to North Carolina, and they were having a house party, and I did not know anyone except the girl that I was dating, and it was this family. It was a married couple. They were, I'd say, late 40s, early 50s. They were a little bit older than us. Um And they were holding this house party in this town in North Carolina. She was invited. She wanted to take me along because she wanted to introduce me to all of her friends. I had never met any of them before, and I thought it would be a cool time, and so I came along. So it's about an hour drive, I remember. And while she and I are in the car on the way to the house party, she starts telling me a bit about the family that we're going to see. Now, this is a lot of personal, sensitive information, so I'm gonna try not to mention any names. Um, but she was telling me a bit about their background and their story. So it's a married couple. They've been married for a while. They had 3 sons. But then she started telling me about how their youngest son, um, yeah, I'm gonna come up with a fake name. What's a what's a good fake name? I don't want to get too hung up on it. Let's call him Aaron. Okay. Aaron was the youngest son, and I believe he was about 13 or 14 years old when he sadly took his own life. Now, I don't know the fully of all the details, but as I know, he had some kind of disability with, I think he was like autistic, or like he had some kind of social disability, but he was also like very intelligent, kind of quiet. And my girlfriend at the time told me that one day he took his father's pistol, went into, and then Aaron took his father's pistol, went into Aaron's bedroom, sat on his bed, and proceeded to, yeah, he shot himself in the head, died right there on the bed. And I'm like, oh my God, that is for a parent to have to go through that. And she was like, yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, it's good to know, right? Like, I'll try not to, I'll try to give that topic a wide berth. And she's like, no, they pretty much bring it up all the time. And I'm like, okay. So we finally get to the house. It's kind of like a very modest suburban 2-story house. It's not that big, but the one thing that was notable about this property was that the backyard was freaking huge and it was decked out. Like you could like play football in their yard, or like set up goalposts and have a full-on soccer match. I mean, it was a huge yard, lots of space. They had this one section that was all gardens. They had this like super elaborate, huge deck. Um, the yard itself was perfect for parties. They had a pool. They had like their own little like customized made like bar and everything. It was awesome. A whole bunch of people there, and yeah, early summer, bright sunny summer day. I'm there. She introduces me to everyone. We're hanging out. He's working the bar. The father is. There's drinks are aplenty. There's like, yeah, there's substances being passed around. Um, Nothing too crazy. They're totally legal now, if you know what I mean. Anyway, and everyone was just there. There was just a whole crap ton of people. Like half the neighborhood showed up. It was mostly like couples, married couples. And um, one of the things, there are a couple things that stuck out to me about this place when I was there. First things, first and foremost, this whole property was essentially kind of set up as a shrine to their youngest son, who had sadly taken his own life. Now, the timing, it had been not even a year since the events of him passing away. So this wound was still very fresh. It was still something, the grieving process was not something that they were out of the woods from, they were still very heavily in grief. And my suspicion was that one of their main coping mechanisms for dealing with their grief was they just turned their property into like the biggest hangout spot, and they would just have all these people over all the time. Because after this night, or my first meeting them, I would go there like, at least once or twice a month. They would throw these events. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, became very good friends with them to this day. Um, I know they don't watch this show, so I feel like I could talk about this story. So yeah, first things first, the whole place was set up like a shrine to their son. There were plaques everywhere that was like in memory of Aaron. There was a tree, and I remember in the yard, and they had this plaque at the base of the tree, where it's basically like this tree is dedicated to the memory of the youngest son. Um, they had pictures of him everywhere. They had like a chalkboard, I remember, in the bar area where there's like people writing messages. Like this whole place was still very much like they made it known. They made sure you knew who he was as soon as you walked through the door. And throughout the course of my mingling with them and socializing with them, they would just keep bringing him up. Because I have met a few parents who have been going through the grieving process, and I know some where they would tiptoe around the topic. They would never bring it up. They would kind of shy away from it, but others would like lean into it and talk about it all the time. Different people have their own different ways of dealing with grief naturally. This was the couple that where they had to have every single reminder, and they had to bring him up in every conversation. Like, we would be talking about something, completely unrelated, and then the father would be walking by, and he'd be like, "Oh, yeah, Aaron used to love that," right? It was like that kind of situation. Um, that was the first notable thing. The second notable thing that was about this place, and I've never seen it before, not quite seen it since. There were fucking hummingbirds zipping around everywhere, right? You ever go to like a really marshy place and there's just like dragonflies all over the place, where to the point where they're just like all over, and then you kind of have to duck because there's some that are like flying in your face? Or like when the cicadas come out and they're just fucking everywhere. We just had that here in Maryland a few years ago, where the cicadas are just like bouncing off you, and there's just like piles of them. It almost felt like that. Like, it felt like I was in a swampy area and there's just fucking mad dragonflies everywhere, but instead of dragonflies, it was just hummingbirds. There were just hummingbirds freaking everywhere. I'd never seen so many hummingbirds just randomly, like, zipping around, like, getting right up on people's faces, to the point where I had to duck because I was like, "Yo, that shit almost poked my fucking eyes out." Right? I was like, "Why are there so many hummingbirds?" And we'd be on the deck, they'd be all over the deck. I'd go from the deck into the kitchen, into the bar. I saw one hummingbird just kind of zip into the doorway, zip out, and I'm like, "Holy shit, this is a lot of hummingbirds." You literally, like, had to duck at how many there were. And, I remember the mom, and, I went up to the kid's mom and I was like, "Yo, what's up with all these hummingbirds? I mean, this is the middle of, like, suburban North Carolina. There's hummingbirds fucking everywhere." And she's like, "Yeah," she goes into this whole idea of, like, they're here, hummingbirds are apparently messengers from the other side, and they are the way of reminding her that her youngest son Aaron is still around. And you can see the tears welling up in her eyes, and she's like, "Yes, these hummingbirds are here because they're Aaron's reminders to us that he's still here with us." And so now I'm starting to think, man, I'm kind of getting remember, paranormal shit is just fresh in my brain, right? So I'm starting to think, may I wonder if like their grief and their inability to let go is keeping this kid's spirit or soul trapped in here or some shit because they're like the whole house is set up as a shrine to this kid. Parents will keep bringing him up. There's fucking hummingbirds everywhere. I'm like, what the fuck? And then she's like, yeah, they're just they're here to remind me that our son is still here. And then I, like the asshole that I am, kind of sneak over to my girlfriend and I'm like, yeah, or maybe it's the fact that they had fucking hummingbird feeders like everywhere. That might have had something to do with it. I don't know. I'm not an ornithologist. I ain't no fucking bird watcher, but maybe that had something to do with it. All the fucking sugar water things all over the place. I don't know. I don't consider myself that smart, but that's just my theory. Yeah, I've never seen so many hummingbirds just casually like zipping around like one dude's yard before. It's fucking wild. And then, so my mind is going, remember, now I'm feeling pretty lit up because of all the libations we've been taking part in. I'm still fresh into the paranormal. I'm starting to think about it. And, everyone's out in the back, on the deck, in the bar area, out in the pool. No one's inside, but, I'm like, I have to go to the bathroom. I walk into the house. The house itself is empty. It's a pretty old house, 2-story. And I remember it's from the deck, you walk into the kitchen, and from the kitchen, you go into the living room. I remember from the kitchen to the living room, it goes into this long, narrow hallway into the bathroom. Once I hit the living room, I had this weird, weird feeling, right? They had 2 pit bulls. They were both friendly. And one of the pit bulls, I remember, was doing zoomies by itself in the fucking living room, right? It didn't really make much sense to me because there's a whole bunch of fucking people here who have like plates of food and shit. The other dog is just like out mingling and just getting all up in people's faces. This dog was actually very friendly, but I walk in to take a pee pee and I see the dog in there doing zoomies by itself. I'm like, what the? What a weird ass dog. Oh, Corey, hold on to your butts. You will find out. So I remember this. This dog is like doing zoomies, right? Spinning around in circles. It stops and stares at the corner, looks back at me, stares back in the corner, and then starts doing zoomies again. Stops, stares at the corner, looks back at me, and proceeds to do this. I'm walking past, and at this point, I I get this weird feeling. The way I would describe it, and the way I have described it in previous stories was it felt like I was walking through electrically charged cobwebs. I don't know. It was like the air and the atmosphere there felt very thick and heavy, and the only way I could describe it was feeling like electrically charged almost. Like it was getting like I felt like I was getting all this static, right? I mean, I'm not like seeing lightning or nothing, but it just felt weird. The way I would describe it, it was like walking through electrified cobwebs. Slightly electrified. I wasn't getting shocked or zapped or nothing. And I walked past the dog looking down at it. I'm like feeling this weird sensations. And my first thought is, well, I have been thinking about the paranormal. This house is weird. I am staring at this deceased kid's face, like is looking at me because his picture is pretty much all over. You guys all hear and see me okay? Everyone in the chat. And yeah, that was weird. My replay just started playing. That startled me. Anyway, yeah, electrified cobwebs. But yeah, I'm thinking, well, I just started thinking about paranormal shit and I'm all hopped up on libations and I really got pee real bad. So maybe it's just my own brain fucking with me, right? Maybe I'm fucking with myself. I don't know. I go to the bathroom and I walk out and I see this pit bull. It's like baby pit bull, cute thing. She was adorable, by the way. Yeah, she's just doing zoomies, looking to corner, looking back at me. Eventually, she kinda goes out back into the party and just mingles and begs everyone for food, like most dogs do. Um, Party's winding down, right? And people are going home. Most of the people live in the neighborhood, so they don't have to worry about driving. A lot of them just walk home because all the houses are fairly close to each other, even though this guy's yard is pretty huge. They all like most of them like live down the street or they have designated drivers. My girlfriend and I, we are way too lit to drive. And so she's like, "Oh, I sleep over here all the time because we meet up here and I would hang out here and we get drunk and chill and chit chat. And yeah, we could just crash here. And, I have my regular spot." And then the couple, the father and the mother, they're like, "Yeah, you and your lady, why don't you guys stay here tonight? You guys can head out in the morning." I'm like, "Cool. Okay. Where are we sleeping?" And then they're like, "Oh, you can sleep in Aaron's room." And I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, you could sleep in Aaron's room." And then I'm like, "Oh, okay." I pull my girlfriend aside because at this point I know what happened to him, and I'm like, I take her into like this, private area just to have a little private conversation. I'm like, "Hey, yeah, I am not comfortable sleeping in that room given the knowledge that I have of what happened in that room, and I don't feel right. It just feels wrong." How about this? It's June. It's a perfectly clear, perfect weather night. Why don't can I just sleep somewhere else, like out on the deck? I mean, there are all these couches and or the bar area, like they have all these cool couches. Can I just sleep here? She's like, what's wrong? Why don't you want to sleep in that room with me? My girlfriend says to me. And I'm like, I don't feel right there. And she's like, "Oh, it's no big deal. I sleep over there. I sleep over here all the time, and I sleep in that room all the time." And I'm like, "On that bed?" She's like, "Yeah, on the bed." "You mean the same bed, the same spot where this kid took his own life?" She's like, "Yeah, it's no big deal. I sleep like a baby." At this point, Dead Files is going through my head. I'm thinking about all the weird feelings I got in the living room and looking at the dog, like, just kinda staring at the corner, even though there's a party going on. Um And I'm like, I don't feel good about this at all. I don't this something fucked up is about to happen tonight. So, yeah, I try to like try to politely, I guess, protest to the kid's dad being like, "Hey, is there anywhere I could sleep?" And then, the kid's dad is like, "Hey, I get it. You might feel uncomfortable, but hey, it's okay. It would mean a lot to me if you and your girlfriend could just enjoy my son's room and just stay there." And I'm like, "Oh man, I can't say no now because that would make me look like an asshole." So I was like, fuck, I gotta sleep in this bed, knowing what happened in that bed, in the room. Yeah. And I am a pretty vivid dreamer. Like I dream often. So I'm thinking like something's gonna like grab my ass when I'm sleeping, or something's gonna fuck with me while I'm lying in bed or when I'm sleeping. 3 a.m. is gonna roll around. There's gonna be like a shot. I don't fucking know what's about to happen. I know something fucked up's about to happen, right? But I eventually acquiesce. There was not much else I could do. Any further protests, I would have seemed rude. So I was like, I have no choice. so so yeah. First thing I noticed in that room, they pretty much left the room exactly as it was when the kid was living there. Like exactly how it was. All of his stuff was all there. All of his clothes was still hanging up in his closet. It was as if the kid was still living there. Like the posters and everything. They didn't change it, didn't alter it at all for guests. No, it was as if it was his room, and his bed was the same bed where he had shot himself. I had to like sleep on the very spot where this kid died, and I'm like, well, at least they changed the sheets. I mean, god damn. But yeah, I'm lying in bed now. Party's over. Girlfriend's conked out. I'm staring up at the ceiling. It's pitch black. Like, I'm nervous because I'm like, "Oh, man, something fucked up's gonna happen." But for some reason, somehow, eventually, maybe it's because I was so lit up, yeah, I eventually fall asleep. So, when so from the time I was lying in bed to the time I fell asleep, nothing happened. I was just lying in bed, just kinda in my own head, but fatigue and alcohol and inebriation got the better of me, eventually wound up passing out. I proceed to have one of the most not one of the most vivid and unexplainable dreams I've ever had in my life. Because especially because I was drinking that night. Whenever I go to bed after drinking, I never dream. I only have vivid dreams when I go to bed sober. Here, I had been drinking, we'd been passing around joints, I was pretty lit up. So I was like, okay, well, normally I don't dream, but that night, right as I fell asleep, I had one of the most vivid, memorable dreams ever had in my life. I wouldn't say lucid. I've had lucid dreams. I've had lucid nightmares. I've had dreams that were nightmares where I became lucid and fought back and won, right? This night wasn't like that at all. This night was completely different. So, let me let me start. I'll this part of the story now. The first part is events leading up to the dream. This part of the story now is going to be the dream itself. So, hold on, let me take my camera off. Okay. You see that picture? I just took a random ass picture of anything that looked like Mordor. That was the setting of the dream, right? As soon as the dream starts, I am in this place. All right. It's like a Mordor looking place. Sky's all black. It's all like just jagged rocks. Everything's all dark and black. I mean, it literally the landscape of this dream looked exact. And I ain't never had a dream like that before, nor since. Okay. The way the dream starts off, I'm in a huddle position. I'm standing around. I cannot recall exactly how many people there were around me. I think it was like I'm leaning towards 5 or 6, but it was 5 or 6 people around my age, a mix of men and women, a mix of backgrounds. I remember there was like one white guy, one girl, one black dude. There was me. We were all standing around, kind of like in a huddle position. And one of the things I remember is I could see them clearly. Like I remember what they even look like their hair and their bodies. The weird thing was I could not make out any of their faces. Their faces looked like it was pixelated. I mean, this is exactly how it looked, right? Everything else was crystal clear, except when I looked at the details of the face, it was like pixelated, like in Cops, like that old show Cops. Whenever they don't have the consent of the person on the show, they pixelate their face to hide their identity. That's exactly how it looked. And I remember all these people with these pixelated faces. We were all in a huddled position. The weird thing is, I could not tell you any of their names, but the weird thing is, it felt like I had known them forever, like forever, ever. Like this was my crew. This was my squad. This was my, I wouldn't say family, but this was my team. Like I felt so familiar with them, but I couldn't tell you any of their names. Again, a mix of men and women, mix of different backgrounds. Everything was clear, but their faces were pixelated. But we were talking to each other as if we had known each other forever. We were in a huddle position, And they all look towards me and they're like, "Okay, Donnie, you brought us here. What's up? What are we here to do?" And so I kind of point off into the distance at this like foreboding ass looking like that, except on top of the mountain, there's this like dark, real pitch black, like foreboding looking castle, like a medieval castle, like something straight out of Mordor, right? I pointed that, it's like way off into the distance, and I'm like, "You see that, guys? That's where we're going. This is why I brought you here. And there's someone in there that we need to bust out." And I remember one of the guys in that group, and this is the crazy thing about this dream was that I remember specific lines of dialogue. I remember I remember reacting to different lines of dialogue. I remember hearing things other people saying, and I'm actually thinking about what I'm going to say. Like this level of decision making and choice making, I've never I've never had a dream in my life that was like this, right? This was like this didn't feel like a dream. This felt like I was in like some kind of virtual reality simulation, or like I was in a video game or something where, those RPGs where you kind of have to like think about your reaction or like choose which line of dialogue you want to say. It felt like that because at that moment when I point to the distance at that mountain with that castle, one of the guys with the pixelated face, he's like, "Nah, no, fuck this." And then all the other members, including myself, we all look at him and we're like, "Yo, what's going on?" And he's like, "Do you people not understand where we are right now? This is fucking crazy. And you want us to go where? You want us to go there? Do you understand what that place is?" And then like, he's going off. The other people are kind of like looking back and forth between him and me. And I'm like, I'm actually legitimately shocked like, at his reaction. And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Dude, you realize if we get caught, we are not getting out of here." And everyone's like, "What?" And for a second, I'm like, "Holy shit, are you serious?" And he's like, "Yeah, you people don't understand what this place is. If we get caught by whatever's guarding that place, we're going to be stuck here forever." And people are like, "Oh, I don't know." Everyone's feeling all like people are pensive, you know. I'm just like, "Hey guys, listen. I brought you here. This is what we're going to do. Okay? If you're with me, you're with me. If you're not, you're not. I mean, but I'm here. We made it this far. I'm gonna go in there and get that dude out if it's the last fucking thing I do." Eventually people, and I remember giving this speech. I remember like trying to think of what to say. I remember like reacting, being like shocked, and then being like, "Nah, fuck this. No, we're getting that dude out." Eventually the group agrees to join and help. I remember that one guy, he was like, "Okay, fuck it, fine, we'll do this, okay? Um, you're the leader this time." And that point was very clear to me. It didn't feel like I was the leader of the group per se. It was just that because we were there on my accord for that particular mission, I was the leader. So it I remember the dream kind of cuts to like from that whole dungeony looking castle being off in the distance to now we're inside. Inside, it looks like typically this is how it looked inside. A deep ass dark dungeon. Except on the walls, there were all these like big ass looking iron doors, right? It was dark, it was foreboding. I'm seeming to use that word a lot, but it's the best word I can think of. And it just kind of went on forever. We just kind of snuck inside. And I remember making our way through this corridor past all these doors. And the funny thing about these doors were each door was different. You couldn't see inside because it was like solid iron almost, like a big steel door, like you would imagine out of a dungeon. Except you didn't see the bars. You couldn't look inside. You could only hear what was on the other side, right? And I remember we would walk past some doors, and you could hear muttering, maniacal laughing, crying, screaming, silence, all sorts of different people in there. None of them sounded like they were having a good time. But again, it was all like a whole range of emotions. I remember there was some where people were actually like laughing. Um, but it felt like I was walking through like some Arkham Asylum shit, you know? You know those Batman stories where they're walking through Arkham and each cell has got some new weird crazy person? That's what it felt like. That's what this place looked like. So imagine this place, except there's these like big ass doors and there are all these sounds. Not all of them, some were silent. And I remember we were sneaking through the hallway, and basically we were sneaking past these things. They looked like the mentors from Harry Potter. Except in my dream, I remembered they were kind of roaming the halls in pairs, side by side, and they were carrying lanterns. And they were just silently, like, kind of hovering and roaming the corridors. I guess they were the guards. And it was a situation where we would like duck behind a corner, wait for them to pass, and then just try to like sneak past them like it was some kind of like Metal Gear Solid stealth kind of game. I remember that distinctly. It looked like the mentors from Harry Potter, but they were shoulder to shoulder in pairs, roaming up and down the hallways past these big iron doors with all these random sounds from people. So they're kind of following me. We're making our way through. And I remember it was like the last one on the left. And it was like right before you get to this T junction. And it was this one door. And I knew this was the door we were looking for. So we managed to pry the door open. I guess they didn't have locks in hell. I don't know. We managed to pry the door open. And I remember inside it looked like a typical dungeon cell. It was all just like stone ceiling, walls, floor, completely dark. The only light that was in the room was actually the light from the hallway when we opened the door. So all we can make out was just the walls, the ceiling. And I remember we're in the door and it was on the right side. I mean, this room was pretty narrow, and on the right wall, on my right side, there's like a bench kind of protruding from the wall. And on that bench, there was this like black figure, almost looked like a shadow person of a, no features at all. I can only make the outline of the body, but it was kind of just sitting there with its head down in in complete silence, sitting on the bench. And I knew that was our guy. That is who we came to here to get. Everyone knew. And I'm like, I run into the cell and I'm like, come on, man, let's go. We're getting you out of here. And the thing like doesn't even respond. And I'm like, come on, man, let's go. We're here to get you out. And the thing finally is like not wanting to move. So I go to grab it. This person sitting on this bench. Again, I can't make out any features. It's like a completely pitch black shadow person. I grab this thing and I try to like pull him off the bench. And this dude is like grabbing onto the bench. And it's pretty clear at this point, this guy's fucking refusing to leave. Right? No sounds or nothing, but it's just holding it, clutching onto that bench for like dear life. And I'm like trying to pull him off the bench. And then eventually my buddies who came with me, the pixelated faces, they come join me. They like kind of try to help me to pry this guy off the bench. This guy's not moving. As a matter of fact, it's like his body is stretching out. And then, the one of the guys is like, "Come on, man. He doesn't want to go. He wants to stay. Let's just get the fuck out of here." And I'm like, "No, we are not leaving until without this dude. If it's the last, I don't give a fuck. We're getting this guy the fuck out of here." And we're struggling and we're trying to pull him off, and bam, these motherfuckers show up like a jump scare, right? They're right up on us, and then we hear this like loud screeching sound, like to the point where it's like imagine. a banshee shriek, right? To the point where you're covering your ears. And we're covering our ears. We're like, "Oh my god." And then all of a sudden, boom, we are now in this dusty ass, old looking. It's like this. We're suddenly in a completely different room. The way I would describe it, like in this picture, it looked like a fucking old timey courtroom from like the 1700s. Except it was like this one big judge's bench, and it was like really tall. And there were like these two tables, and it was dusty as hell. Everything was like wood and dusty looking. It looked like this picture, like a courtroom from like the 1800s, except not as much shit. It was just the bench and just the tables. That was it. There was no like spectators. I remember there were a few benches like kind of around where people could sit, but um we're in this room. It's completely empty except for our group. We're there. Um, we're like, "Oh shit." And the one thing I do remember that was interesting about this room was that around the walls and the floor, everything looked normal, except the place had no ceiling. Like the ceiling kind of went up forever, or like the walls kind of went up forever. Like if you looked up at the ceiling, it just kind of went up, and it was just like until it was like off in the distance. Like it looked like a regular room when you were looking ahead of you or to your side, but as soon as you looked up, it felt like you're at the bottom of a pit. And it's just me and my group, my team. And then we look behind us, and sitting on one of the back benches is that same guy that was in the cell. Again, he looks exactly the same. This room is a little better lit, but he looks like a totally pitch black shadow person. Again, same position as he was in his cell, sitting on a bench with his head down. And I remember one of the guys on my team was like, "Do you realize where we are right now?" And we're like, and I'm like, "No." And some of us are like, "No." And he's like, "This is the fucking courtroom. This is where you get judged." And then one of the other people's, I think it was one of the other I can't remember if it was me that said this or if it was one of the other team members that said this, but they were like, "Judge, we're not even dead." And the guy was like, "I told you we'd get stuck here if we got caught. And now we're being judged." And I'm like, "How can we be judged? We're not even dead yet." He's like, "It doesn't matter. You broke the fucking rules. Okay. Now here we are. And now we got to think of an argument. The judge is going to come." And I'm like, and then we're all like, oh my God, this is going to happen. We're fucked. We're completely fucked. And I'm like, "Okay, calm down, guys." And I'm like stressing out. Motherfucker from the cell is sitting back there all quiet, looking all pitch dark. I'm around my fucking team. They're freaking the fuck out. And I'm just like, "Okay, guys, calm down. Okay, here. I'm trying to think of what to say, right? I'm trying to build a case, like say like my piece. I've got this whole monologue planned in my brain, like what I'm going to do when the judge comes in, right? Until finally, boom, door swings open behind that big judge's bench. Fucking judge comes out. The judge, he looked, honestly, the best way I could describe it, he looked kind of like Santa Claus without the jumpsuit, of course, but like he had a white beard. He was like Santa Claus if he was maybe like 40 pounds lighter. Um, I remember he was real jovial though, which is kind of weird because the courtroom itself was a very dreary, dark looking place. But this guy comes in like kind of like, "Oh, hey guys, how's it going?" And I was like taken aback at being like, "Whoa, I wasn't expecting that." This Santa Claus looking dude. And I'm like, I'm getting ready. And then he's just like all smiles. He's like, "You guys can go. Don't worry about it. You guys are free to go." And I'm like, really? He's like, "Yeah, yeah, no, you're fine. You can go." And I'm like, and everyone around me, my team, they're like, "Oh my God," they're so relieved, right? Everyone's so relieved except for me. And I'm like, "But I had this case. I had this monologue planned. Oh man. At least can I get my speech at least? You know? So everyone's kind of like high-fiving each other. They're all happy. I guess I'm feeling relieved. I'm like, okay, I guess we're not completely fucked. But then we all look back on the dude on the bench and we're like, what about what about him? Is he free to go? And he's the judge was just like, that's up to him, as if to imply like he had the choice to leave whenever he wanted. And then at that point, this dude like lights up, like all of a sudden completely flips. And now instead of this dark, pitch black shadow person, he's like this guy in these glowing ass white clothes. I remember there were glowing white clothes. I remember what he looked like. He was like in his, I'd say like early to mid 20s, in very good shape, but he was a black guy. He was African American. But then as soon as he changed, everything lit up for him. Like this guy was like glowing now, and he had this huge grin on his face. Like this guy looked happy and beaming, and he's like, "I'm ready to go." Right. And then he looks towards me and he's like, "Donnie, I want to thank you for, not giving up on me." And then as soon as he started addressing me, that's when the fucking everything just hit me like a freaking tsunami. I was like, at that moment when he addressed me, I was like, I suddenly realized where I was. I remembered all of the events of the night before, or not the night, well, I guess that night of being at this house party, being in this kid's bed. Like, I knew that I was dreaming at that point, and I knew where I was sleeping, who was sleeping next to me, and in which room I was sleeping in. And then I looked at the guy and I'm like, realizing that I'm sleeping in this dead kid's bed, I look at the guy and I'm like, "Aaron, is that you, dude?" And he's like smiling. His smile grows even bigger. And I'm like confused and I'm like, "But I mean, the kid in the picture was I mean, I don't want to sound racist or nothing. I remember even saying this. This is the funny part. I remember actually saying like, I don't want to sound racist or nothing, but aren't you supposed to be a 14-year-old white kid? You're black." And the guy starts laughing and he kind of looks up and down at his body. He's like, "Yeah, I think I'll get used to this new body." And I'm like, "Whoa." And then he looks at me all serious. He's like, "Are you going to tell my parents?" And I'm like, "What the fuck am I even, how would I even tell them this? What, that their son is being reincarnated as a African American? I don't know about too much about your dad. I just met him tonight. I think I might have seen a Confederate flag. I don't know how cool he'd be with that whole story." And then the guy starts laughing. He's like, "Yeah, that's my dad. Don't worry about it, man." And then, everyone's all smiles. Everyone's all happy. The judge is like this jovial Santa Claus looking dude. My team's all around me. They're high fiving each other. This guy, he's just been like restored to his like new glory. He's about to get out of the place. And I remember there's like this tunnel of light opens up, and this guy kind of like starts kind of floating up into it. And we're looking at him. And this is the weird part. I'll never, this was a very specific thought and realization I had in this dream, and I will not forget this. I remember as me and the team, we were all watching him go up into that tunnel. We all had our hands up like this to like block our eyes so we could kind of see the light, but not, like when the eclipse happened, you don't want to look directly into the sun, but you kind of want to look in that direction. We were like that. I remember I was looking at him going into the light being like this, right? And I remember distinctly the reason why I did that was because for some weird reason, I just knew. No one told me. I didn't learn it anywhere. It was just this knowledge was just in my brain that looking directly into the light was against the rules. I just had that knowledge. That's why when I looked at him, I had my hand up because I just instinctively knew that it was against the rules to look directly into the light. but I wanted to look his way. And as he was going up into the light, he was looking down at us. He was thanking us, thank you guys. And we're like, hey, man, good luck on your next adventure, man. Hey. And then I remember when I woke up, I was already awake before my eyes even opened, if that makes sense. Like, it was as if I looked up into that black void and I could see, like, my own eyelids opening, and I was already completely 100 awake and aware even before my eyes opened. And I remember I just opened my eyes knowing exactly where I was lying. I knew that I was gonna be looking at the ceiling of this kid's room, and I was just like I just opened my eyes. It wasn't even like I woke up. It's just like I was in this dream and I just opened my eyes, and I was back in reality. I've never had that happen before. Not before, not since. And yeah, there wasn't any grogginess. There wasn't any, "Oh, was this clear? Was that clear?" No, I went straight from being in that courtroom and then seeing the ceiling open, and now I'm looking at the ceiling of this kid's room, and I'm like 100% awake. This was the weirdest fucking shit I ever experienced in my life. Like, I never had a dream like that ever. I never woke up like that, where I was already awake, knowing that my eyes were about to open, and already knowing what I was gonna be facing, to hit the ceiling. It was as if, like I said, it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like I was coming out of a virtual reality simulation. It was so weird, and I only experienced it that one time. And for the rest of the week, I'm just like, "Holy shit, what the hell did I experience?" I was playing that dream over and over in my head, being like trying to analyze it, being like, "Wait a minute. Did that actually happen? Or was that just a dream?" And maybe, I was so worked up and I had just gotten into paranormal. I was freaked out about being in this kid's room. Maybe I worked myself up into that dream, but the way I woke up though, the fact that I just like I didn't even wake up. I just opened my eyes knowing what I was going to see and being already awake before I even opened my eyes. I mean, that part felt special, but maybe I just really did just work myself up. I remember that Monday I went to work. Spent the week pretty I remember it was a pretty busy work week. My girlfriend was living in Raleigh at the time. I was about half an hour away from there, and she was busy. She had her own shit she had to do, her work and school stuff, and I had my work stuff, and so we couldn't really see each other on the weekdays. We would like call each other, and maybe she would stop by like once or twice. But the weekends was when we would really hang out. So Monday I go back to work. So from Monday to Saturday, I'm going to work and I'm being like, oh, man, did that shit really happen? I mean, what the fuck was that dream? Who were those people? What the fuck? Why was he black? Who the fuck was that Santa Claus looking dude? I mean, what was that place? That whole hellscape? Was that actually hell? Was that some kind of like I've got all these thoughts going in my brain, and I'm like getting kind of I'm like obsessing over it because on the one hand, I'm thinking I had this really profound, hyperdimensional spiritual experience, but on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, but you were drunk and you had just gotten into paranormal, so maybe you're just kind of you know putting yourself into a work, right? I couldn't I was so 50-50, guys. I was completely 50-50. I didn't know what to think either way. Weekend comes around. I so this is about a week later. Weekday, I'd spent thinking about that night and that dream, just wondering what the fuck happened. And then Saturday comes, I go to my girlfriend's place. No idea what we're gonna do on the weekend. It's just our thing, right? Just go to her apartment on the weekend, bring my dog, and we just hang out. And then she's like, "Hey, Donnie, I thought we were just gonna stay there the weekend at her place, right?" And she's like, "Hey, oh, hey, guess what?" And I'm like, "What?" "Oh, that mom and dad, Aaron's parents, they invited us over this time again. This time, just the two of us, just to hang out. And I was like shocked because like after going through this weird ass experience, and then suddenly a week later, just out of the blue, realizing I am going back there and I'm going to be sleeping there again. I'm like, what? So, and it was so sudden too. It was so last minute. And she's like, "Okay, so, I'm gonna get ready." I'm like, "Okay, well, I'll wait for you in the car." She was living in an apartment complex, and it was, like, in the middle of Raleigh, but the complex itself, it had, like, a parking lot with, like, trees, and there was, like, a little path that went to, like, a park nearby. So, I was, like, waiting for her while she was getting ready. I went out to the car to smoke a cigarette, suddenly realizing that I was going back there after a week. I'm like, "Holy fuck." So as I'm smoking, I lean back against the tree, and I remember I said my very first prayer, I legitimate prayer I'd ever given in my entire life since I stopped being a Christian. I'd say I left the church probably when I was in college, like 2021. But I think I really just stopped giving a crap about Christianity probably around, well, like, when I was 16. So I'd say legitimately last time I legitimately prayed to God, I was, like, 16 years old. Um, yeah, like, more like 25 years. But this time, I gave my first prayer to God, legitimate prayer to God, with a cigarette in my hand, leaning up against a tree, waiting for my girlfriend to get ready. And I remember putting my head down and closing my eyes. And I remember for the first time I prayed, I said, "God, I know it's been a while. My bad. And I'm not asking for much, but do you think you could just do me one little solid here? Can you just let me know either way? Am I just full of shit or did that really happen? Just give me a sign, will you please?" Okay. So let me rewind back to the party the week before. Remember when I told you the party was happening and there were all those hummingbirds flying around and they were all zipping in and out and I had to kind of duck them and avoid them? Well, I remember at one point at the party, we had just gotten our food. By the way, the Aaron's dad was a hell of a good cook, man. That guy made some good ass barbecue. I mean, he had this whole spread and everything, and everyone got their food. And me and my girlfriend and one other person at the party, this other guy that we had just met, we were like chatting with. We are all out in the back, just kind of casually eating our food, looking around at the gardens, watching all these hummingbirds zip around. And you know me, I like to do observational humor, like Seinfeld. It was my Seinfeld moment. And as we're eating, we're all looking around at all these hummingbirds. And I said to the two people that were with me, I was like, "You know what's really funny about hummingbirds?" And they're like, "What, Donnie?" And I'm like, "Have you ever seen a hummingbird just not, humming?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "Every time I've seen a hummingbird, like in real life or on TV, or like in an animal documentary, they're always doing that fucking hovering helicopter shit, like flapping their wings like a buzzard. They're like these little helicopters, zipping in and around, right?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, and they're like, "So?" And I'm like, "Have you ever seen a hummingbird just sitting there before?" And they kind of look at each other and they kind of think about it. They're like, "No, I can't say that I have." And I'm like, "Me neither. I've never seen what a hummingbird looks like when it's just sitting there chilling. Every time I see a hummingbird, it's doing that helicopter shit." They think about it and they're like, "Damn, Donnie, you're right." And it was like my little observational humor. And then I remember pointing out, like, I could walk past a hummingbird just sitting there, like on a fence or on a branch or something. I would see it and I probably wouldn't even realize that it was a hummingbird because I'd never seen a hummingbird just sitting on its ass before. They were both laughing about it. The reason why I rewound to that little bit was because I gave that prayer for the very first time in my life. I said, "God, sorry that I haven't talked in a while. I probably am not gonna pray to you again for a while either. But I just got one solid ask. Can you just let me know either way? It's really driving me nuts. Just let me know either way. Am I full of shit? Did I just kind of shoot myself into a work? Or did that really happen? And did me and that group of people really break that kid out?" Right. And I remember I was closing my eyes. I remember closing my eyes, leaning back against the tree, and I had a cigarette in between my fingers, and I was like saying this prayer. And then as soon as I open my eyes, there is a fucking hummingbird hovering like 3 feet in front of my face. Like I'm here, and this hummingbird is like right here, right? Like just like hovering there in front of my fucking face. And I'm like, whoa, like that. I jump back, I hit the back of my head against the tree, and I'm like, what the fuck? Because I was startled. Like as soon as I opened my eyes from this prayer, this fucking hummingbird is like 2, 3 feet in front of my face, just hovering there. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like staring at this thing. And do you remember that scene from RoboCop 2? I don't know if you guys remember that movie or not, where RoboCop was reprogrammed, and then he was like teaching all these kids about like don't do drugs and don't do crime, and then all of a sudden he sees that guy who was smoking, and then he shoots that. Hold on, let me find a picture because okay, I am going to load this picture because this picture perfectly encapsulates what went on in my head, or what I looked like. All right, sorry, it's a little clunky, like loading pictures up in this shit. Please forgive my awkward pauses, guys. But this is what I looked. I had a cigarette in my mouth. I'm like leaning up against the tree. Like my jaw, like it's like falling out of my mouth, and I'm just that's what I look like at that moment. And then this hummingbird is just like hovering in front of my fucking face. And this isn't like some garden or some shit. This is an apartment complex in downtown Raleigh. There's no like, yeah, there was a park, but like this is a parking lot in Raleigh. Like just right around the corner, there's a fucking 7-Eleven. There were no hummingbirds hovering around. I happened to open my eyes at that moment, and one is like hovering right in front of my face. And then like I was leaning back against this tree, and then it lands on the fucking branch of a tree. Like it was kind of like 5 feet like diagonally to my right. And it sat on the branch of the tree, and it just kind of looked at me like that. Kind of like as a throwback to that joke. Like God was saying, "Hey, remember that joke you made? Well, here, this is what it looks like." And it did it right in front of me. As soon as I opened my eyes from that prayer, asking God to give me a sign, letting me know if I really did let that kid go, or if me and that team really did get that kid out, or if that was just me being full of shit. And then I opened my eyes from the prayer, hummingbird's right in front of my face, lands on a branch like it was it was extending out from the trunk that I was had my back leaning against. So it was like right there, and it just cocks its head and looks directly at me. And then I'm just sitting there like with a dumb look on my face, cigarette in my mouth. It's like about to fall out. So that moment was I will never forget that moment as long as I live, because I was like, I had read about synchronicities. I had read about signs from God or God answering your prayers, but I didn't realize he was going to be. I was like, way to be subtle about it, God. Damn, this dude's subtle like a fucking headbutt to the bridge of the nose. Damn. I was like, what? I mean, nobody told me God would be so freaking obvious about stuff, you know? That guy's as subtle as a bull in a china shop sometimes. Anyway, so the funny thing, a funny little addendum to that story is that after, you know, that night we went there, we chilled, nothing crazy happened. We still, you know, slept there. I had since slept there over few more nights, and all those other nights were completely uneventful. I did, because we would always sleep there whenever they threw parties because it was too far to drive and people would be drinking. But yeah, I would sleep in the same place. Nothing would happen. The funny thing is, I did not see any more hummingbirds come back to that place. Second time I came back, zero hummingbirds. Every time I went back, ever since, zero hummingbirds. As a matter of fact, I remember the year later, the next summer, they were having a house party, and I remember I was hanging out with that kid's mom, and I said to her, "Hey, remember last year when you and I first met? That first party we went to, and there were all those hummingbirds." And she was like, "Yeah, I remember that night very well. The first night you and I met, because we were pretty good friends at this point." And I'm like, "Yeah, there were all those hummingbirds. You remember?" And she's like, "How can I forget?" And I'm like, "What? Why? What happened to all the hummingbirds? Why have they stopped coming?" And she was like, "You know what? It's the darndest thing. After that night, I never saw any hummingbirds again." And she specifically noted that it was that night, that first night that we met. And she told me, I would keep sending up these hummingbird feeders ever since that night. Not a single hummingbird has come back since that night. She's like, it's the darndest thing. I used to love having all the hummingbirds. And then, yeah, that night when you and I first met, it was like after that day, they just all stopped coming. That part fucked me up too. That was like a year later. So that was like another boom, in the solar plexus when she told me that. I was like, fuck. And I wanted to tell her so bad about like the dream and everything. And when I was praying and that fucking hummingbird was up in front of my face, but I couldn't say shit. So I had to hold on to it. So yeah, I guess that is the story. Um, so yeah, that is the Donny Cho hummingbird story. Now, some of you people listening at home might hear this story and think, yeah, but that dude was drunk. He had just gotten into the paranormal. He had just started thinking about this shit and getting obsessed with this shit. And that's true. But other people might be like, "Oh my god, he, through some mystical ways tapped into this other dimension and freed this kid's soul and helped him to cross over and reincarnate." There's that side too, and I do want to believe that, but chances are there are going to be plenty of people out there who hear this and they're going to think, "Yeah, that guy Donnie is full of shit. It's a bullshit story." And I get it. And that's up to you guys to decide, it's not up to me. So yeah, that is my story. That was my, like I mentioned in the beginning of the show, right? Everyone's got that one story that kind of thrusts them into from being a normal dude. Now you're an experiencer. That was the moment for me where I've no ceased to be just a guy who, for all of his life, didn't give a shit about the paranormal. Just recently started thinking about it, and all of a sudden, now I'm like, oh shit, I'm an experiencer now. I'm one of those dudes now, huh? I guess I got like psychical shit going on. I got mystical powers or latent magical energies, or maybe I'm like some hyper advanced multi-dimensional soul. And that's why we were all chosen to have these experiences and get into the paranormal topic, right? I struggle with that thought sometimes that maybe the people who experience these things this paranormal shit, maybe they're all chosen to experience it, They get a glimpse of what the other side is like, because we all know that plenty of people out there who will go their entire lives and never even their brains won't even touch this territory, right? So yeah, that is my story, and I hope you liked it. And oh, before I let you guys go, it would not be the last time I see that team of folks. And eventually, one of those people did reveal their identities to me. The rest of the people are still unknown to me. But sometimes I sit there in my deepest, darkest times. I will sit there and wonder if any of those people are actually real people out there who I've never met yet. And sometimes I wonder if there's like a person out there who actually had that same dream that I had. And he was actually like the living counterpart of one of those pixelated people. I think about that sometimes. Anyway, I'll leave you to it. And now I'm going to go fuck off and play some more Helldivers 2. Peace out.